So welcome back everyone to part 2 of the Q&A. Last week's Q&A was probably like an hour long, so I split it up in 2 episodes, and this is a continuation of that. So I hope you enjoy. Thanks. And if you stay to the end, I have some tea to spill because one of the neighbors came up to me and told me a story, which, by the way, is unconfirmed, but I think it's pretty interesting, so you might want to hear it. This is actually a pretty good question as well. So, J. Yen Chen's son says, were you able to purchase this with a homeowner mortgage or did you have to get a commercial mortgage? And this is an interesting question because this was a massive battle between me and multiple banks and mortgage brokers because this building was originally considered commercial. So they wanted to charge me for a commercial mortgage, which is a higher interest rate than your standard homeowner's mortgage. But the township basically said, hey, listen, we're rezoning this as residential. So you can't really use this as anything else but residential. So I wouldn't mind paying higher percentage points if obviously you could run a business out of here or you can, rent it out to certain commercial spaces to make money and revenue. But since I couldn't do that, I had to argue with them. I was like, here's all the paperwork. Here's all the rezoning. It's zone R1A, which is residential. And, so you can't really do anything about that. Eventually, I got someone to be able to take my, write my loan based off of a residential mortgage rate. So this is on a standard residential mortgage. So this is kind of like adding on to another question before. Leon Pace writes, would turn lower level into a garage and top level into apartments to pay for everything else. So the lower level of turning into a garage, we already addressed. The top level into apartments. So if I ever did turn the top level into apartments, whoever lives there will hate me because I really enjoy working on cars like in the middle of the night. Like sometimes I can't sleep. So I'll get up and, I'll pick up a wrench and I'll work on some projects of mine, just, restless. And that would be absolutely horrendous for whoever's trying to sleep upstairs. Air tools, or electric impact, stuff like that. But that is an interesting thought. Maybe I should live above and then I should turn the bottom into a garage. But we already established that the garage portion is less feasible. It would be cheaper and probably easier to get permitting for just a standalone steel building or a pole barn. Hello, PG6IK writes, have you decided if you're going to make this into one very big home or apartments and a house? And funny enough, I'm leaning towards one big home just because I always wanted one when I was a small child, and I always thought that would be really cool. Like when I was growing up, I was super poor. We lived in like 1-bedroom apartments, studio apartments. Like, my parents had the bedroom, I slept on the couch, stuff like that. And I always thought it'd be cool to have like a mansion, like just dream of, being in a massive house. And now I'm kind of there. It's a school. I remember vividly as a child watching DuckTales, if anyone remembers DuckTales. And there's a scene where Scrooge McDuck jumps into a like mountain or pile of gold coins. And he's just tossing coins up in the air. And he's like, wow, it just seemed like great as a kid. I don't know, I was 3 years old. I was like, wow, this is amazing. So I remember that year I don't know what I got it from, but I saved up $3.50. And I told my mom, I was like, I want to go to the bank and get all pennies. So I got all pennies. So I had 350 pennies and I'm just sitting there in the middle of, the floor of the living room. And I'm just like, what'd be great? Just to recreate that Scrooge McDuck scene and just throw coins in the air. So I'm throwing coins, in the air and I'm just getting pelted by these pennies. And it was very painful. And I just remember my mother looking at me like, wow, this kid's an idiot. What are we going to do with this kid? DC says, do you plan on rewiring and changing the HVAC into something more modern? And the short answer is yes. The long answer is kind of. Short answer in the term is that eventually I think a lot of this should be rewired and also changed to more modern standards. But the timeline is kind of short because we have to do all of this before winter. And that's given if the water's turned on, everything like that. So if the current system can be fixed somewhat easily,
I think that would be probably easier to do than actually retrofit entire system. But at some point in time, I think retrofitting a more modern system is probably the way to go. But also at the same time, I used to have a friend named Shake, and he was a quality engineer, quality control manager for a very large company. And he used to say, if you can possibly not update anything, don't update anything, because everything is really built to planned obsolescence now. So he was saying, so he's a quality engineer. So basically his main goal is to, I guess, I hate to say this really, but he said they have meetings, and this is a large company. I'm not gonna, like call them out, but they have meetings where they talk about how products might be too durable and might last longer than the warranty period. And they have to actually somewhat design something that doesn't cost as much, or doesn't cost more per se, that will decrease the durability of an object. So for instance, let's say you have some sort of thermoplastic that's supposed to be elastic. They could add other elements into it, more carbon, something like that, to make it slightly more brittle, and it won't last through as many life cycles. And that way you have a machine that, let's say, has a warranty for 2 years, and they'll synthetically lab test this until it breaks, and they'll calculate on average how many users are going to use this product for that period of time, and then eventually it'll break right after the warranty period. So I've actually experienced this a lot, but I digress. We'll move on to a different topic because this is probably boring for a lot of people. Long says, I'm not quite sure is Jason's way of saying no. And yes, you're correct. John Snow. I love that username. And I want to say you know nothing, John Snow. But his question was, you should contact the last head custodian of the building. He would know a lot. So funny story is I did. And the only reason it's funny is because I'm sure he knows a lot. So either he knows a lot and is not telling me anything, or he doesn't know a lot. Because every single question I've asked him so far, he's like, not sure. We had a separate department that took care of that. We had a group of electricians that took care of that. We had a group of plumbers that took care of that. We had roofing guys that we hired out to take care of that. We had gutter guys that hired out to take care of that. So like, basically, he's almost like a general contractor. Well, actually, I think a general contractor would actually know more. So basically, every single part of the maintenance aspect was just kind of delegated to some other department or some other company. So because of that, I think a lot of the stuff is pretty unknown to him. But cool thing was he actually grew up in this school as well. He came here when he's 3, and now he's somewhere in his mid, I'd like to say 30s or early 40s. But I have contacted him a couple times. He is super busy though. So he works full time. He has multiple rental properties, stuff like that. Very successful guy, very cool guy to talk to. Just very busy. So every time I try to contact him, I think I hear back from him like 2 or 3 weeks later. So next user, I cannot pronounce their username, so I'm very sorry. Says, pavement holds heat, and with the climate getting warmer, perhaps that's not a good idea. Cherish those trees and, conifers and pines. So I think he's referring to the rear where I said, perhaps I'm going to pave over this. And in terms of holding heat, I'm not really too concerned about that because there's a lot of really tall trees in that area. And all of those trees are going to, shade wherever area is being paved. So I'm not really worried about that. Also, if I am paving it, I'm not going to be using asphalt. Asphalt is notorious for holding a lot of heat since it's, it's called blacktop. So it's probably just going to be regular concrete, maybe 3,000 PSI, 4 inches, rebar, or steel mesh, I guess, since it's a sidewalk. Rebar probably is not necessary. So something like that. And then to comment on someone else when they're talking about drainage, drainage will be considered and drainage will be put in. So it's not like it's just going to, pool up there and just roll back into the house. It's going to be sloped away from the house to drains that will drain so it doesn't affect the surrounding properties. Just to answer this question, it says paving over may create drainage issues. This will affect maybe damp walls. Yeah. Okay. So yes, I have considered that. It will be sloped away from the exterior foundation walls and drainage would be placed in. Girl from California writes, I missed the video where you tell us viewers what your plans are for this old school. And without knowing the regulations in the area, it seems like you have many options. So thank you, Carol from California. I know I always see your comments because it says Carol from California. So thank you for following. I appreciate that. And I honestly don't know. So I know for sure that, like roof, gutters, that kind of stuff needs to be done. And past that, basically, I think maybe a mother-in-law suite just to, have a space for people to stay, hang out. Or maybe eventually at some point in time, if I do collaborate with other YouTubers, if they'll answer my emails, maybe a place for them to stay. That'd be kind of cool. Do some collabs and do some interesting stuff. But I figured, hey, life is short. So why not do something cool and then later on figure it out? So, I don't ever want to have that situation where I look back on life and be like, hey, I kind of regret not doing that. So we're just doing crazy stuff and hopefully it turns out okay. So CVO Lante says, you should dress up your dogs like teachers and reopen the building as a dog school and call it Jason's School for Gifted Canines. And I think that's hilarious. And there's a coming up episode where I want to dress up the dogs as, support characters. And they absolutely hate being dressed up. I bought a winter sweatshirt for Boost one year. And I thought it was cute because I had like a lumberjack flannel shirt. And then I got a flannel shirt for her. And she hated it. She put it on and she thought she was like being suffocated. I'll try to find a picture and post it up if I can. Vera or Knox says, there looks like there's a secret stone doorway at the bottom of the stairs in the backyard. I believe he is referring to this, which is very possible. It could be a secret stone doorway. I'm not really quite sure what's under here, and I'm not prepared to have this whole thing collapse to figure it out. If I can find some historical pictures, I think that'd be really, really cool. But there is a recession here that could have been a doorway, I suppose. And there are power wires. So, I think what would have been more likely is maybe this was some sort of fountain. And eventually they just bricked it up. But it does seem like it's been bricked up for a very, very long time. So I don't know how old this is. But very good eye. Jay's new phone says, Jason assumes no one uses the tub. Well, sir, you don't know. And I say to you, Jay, you're right. I don't know. Here's me in the tub. And if I had water, I would be using it. But that's a premium paid feature. Vicky Chapman says, when do you think you're going to work on the inside of the house? And let me be honest with you, Vicky, I have no idea. Mike Tyson once said, everyone has a plan until you're punched in the face. And every single time I uncover something, I feel like I'm getting punched in the face. So my goal is to get the roof done, the gutters done, and after that, pretty much start working on the inside. But by inside, I mean, we're gonna get the plumbing running first. And then we're gonna get the heat running. And then we're gonna do the cosmetic stuff. So, it has good bones. And definitely I'm excited for working on the inside because that's the stuff people wanna see. That's the stuff that gets people excited, the transformation. The nerdy girl with the glasses now somehow becomes the prettiest girl in the school, that kind of thing. Well, this isn't even a nerdy girl with glasses. This is just a massive wreck. But when it's done, maybe the prettiest girl on the street. In the block, in the neighborhood? I don't know. Bad analogy.
Hey guys, I almost forgot about this, the tea situation. So I just want to preface this that, number one, this is just the story I was told. So I don't know if there's any validity to this, if it's true or not. But I'm just telling a story, and this is what happened. So the other day, I was doing some yard work, and I had this old lady come up to me. She's like, hi, are you the person that bought this place? And I was like, yeah. So, how are you? And she's like, hey, I got a story to tell you. Do you know why they sold this place? And I was expecting, maybe like, oh, it's haunted or something, right? Absolutely not. So she's like, and keep in mind, this is just a story some random woman told me on the street. So I don't know if this is true or not, but I just thought it was interesting and it has some plausible elements to it. So a lot of people are wondering, why did they sell this school? including my electrical inspector, the borough inspector, because the school itself, they don't pay any taxes. So it doesn't really matter. Like, they can hold on to it forever. And not to say it lightly, but they also have a lot of money. So, I mean, they could easily maintain this place and, kept it for years to come for, any reason. So basically, this is the story this woman told me. And please, once again, take it with a grain of salt, because some random woman on the street could be credible. I'm not really quite sure. I didn't verify her credentials. But anyways, she was saying that, in the 50s, 1955, when this house was sold to the school for $1, or, I mean, I guess some people could say donated, the family had some stipulations that the school was only used for education purposes and could not be resold unless the family signed off on it, or it would have to go back to the family. And after this school was no longer needed, so they built a new building, they moved everyone out. Essentially, they no longer had a use for the building. They weren't allowed to sell it unless the family gave the go-ahead. And I think the family gave some sort of friction, because it was a house that, let's say, their great-grandfather or grandfather built. I'm not really quite sure. And apparently, according to this woman, she said all the family members died within like the last year. So I don't think this is like a Boeing, whistleblower situation. I think they all died of natural causes, and they were all very old. But it does give some sort of validity to the situation, I suppose. A plausible scenario to the situation, because it kind of went like in limbo, where the school is like, if this building is going to go back to the family, like, why would we dump a ton of money into it if we're not going to keep it or repurpose it for something else, if we have no say into it? So I guess for those years, they just let it go. And then eventually everyone died out, and they're like, okay, we have the thumbs up to sell it now, because there's no one to oppose us anymore. So once again, please don't sue me. This is just a story I heard from a woman walking by on the street. I did not do any reference checking because a lot of these records I can't even access. But I just thought that was a very interesting story. So thank you for watching to the end, and hope you have a great weekend. Bye.